The lottery ticket sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I even remembered to check it. When the numbers matched, all 6 of them, I nearly collapsed right there on my tile floor. $25 million. After taxes and opting, for the lump sum, I'd walk away with just over $12 million. I, Susan Miller, a 63-year-old retired elementary school principal who had spent 4 decades pinching pennies, was suddenly wealthy beyond anything I'd ever imagined. My first thought wasn't about luxury cruises or beachfront property. It was about my children, Jennifer and Michael. I immediately decided that $4 million would go to them, $2 million each, as a nest egg that would secure their futures forever. No more struggling with mortgage payments or student loans for my grandchildren. No more worrying about retirement the way I had worried all those years. I kept my windfall a secret. The financial advisors suggested discretion, and for once, keeping something to myself felt thrilling. I planned to reveal everything on my upcoming 64th birthday, exactly 3 weeks after my win. I'd invite Jennifer and Michael to my modest home in Springfield, prepare my famous pot roast and apple pie, and after dinner, I'd slide 2 envelopes across the table, each containing documentation for a $2 million trust. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of my birthday dawned bright and clear. I woke early, my heart fluttering with excitement. For the first time since their father Mark left us 26 years ago, I could give my children security, real security. Not the kind that comes from working 60-hour weeks or sacrificing your own needs, but the kind that provides genuine freedom. I spent hours preparing the meal. The pot roast simmered in its rich gravy, filling the house with savory aromas. I baked 2 pies, apple for Michael and cherry for Jennifer, just as I had for every birthday since they were children. I set the table with my good china, wedding gifts I'd barely used but kept pristine through 3 moves and countless life changes. Everything had to be perfect for the moment their lives would transform. At 5 o'clock, I checked my phone. No messages. I wasn't concerned. They were probably planning to surprise me. By 6, I sent a casual text. "Dinner's ready whenever you are." By 7, the roast had dried out. I turned off the oven and moved to the living room, still clutching my phone. The first call came at 7:30. Jennifer's voice sounded rushed, slightly breathless. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Tyler has a fever, and Mark couldn't get home early to watch him. I tried to find a sitter, but you know how it is on short notice. I'll make it up to you this weekend, I promise." I swallowed my disappointment. "Is he very sick? Do you need anything?" No, it's probably just a cold. I'm being cautious. Mom, I really am sorry about your birthday." "Don't worry, sweetie. Family comes first. Give Tyler a kiss from Grandma." Before I could ask more about my grandson's condition, she had already hung up. At 8:15, Michael texted, "Running super late, big crisis at work. Might not make it. Sorry, Mom. Happy birthday." I typed back, "It's okay, honey. Everything all right at work?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Yeah, just client emergency. We'll explain later." I stared at those words for a long time. In the kitchen, 2 pies sat untouched. The gravy had formed a skin. The bottle of champagne I'd splurged on, Dom Perignon, because tonight was meant to be special, remained unopened. When the doorbell rang at 9:45, my heart leapt. Maybe they'd come after all. But it was just Nancy from next door, holding a small gift bag. "Thought I'd drop this off before turning in," she said, then peered past me into the empty house. "They're not here yet?" I forced a smile. Jennifer's son is sick, and Michael had a work emergency. Nancy's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "On your birthday? Again?" "What do you mean, again?" She hesitated. "Oh, nothing. Just..." "Well, last year Michael had that conference, and Jennifer had that house viewing that couldn't wait." I hadn't realized Nancy had been keeping track, but she was right. Last year, neither of my children had made it to my birthday dinner either, or the year before, now that I thought about it. After Nancy left, I poured myself a glass of the expensive champagne and sat alone at my meticulously set table. Two envelopes containing information about the trusts lay beside the centerpiece, their edges crisp and white against the dark wood. $4 million, waiting to change hands, and no one to receive them. Curious despite myself, I opened Facebook. On my phone, something I rarely did. Jennifer had posted just 20 minutes ago. Perfect evening at the symphony with the hubby. Date night, blessed. The photo showed her and Robert dressed elegantly, champagne flutes in hand, certainly nowhere near a sick child. A strange numbness spread through me. I checked Michael's profile next. He'd checked in at Riverside Golf Club 2 hours ago. Nothing beats unwinding with friends after a hectic week. 19th hole. So there it was. My son and daughter had both lied to me. On my birthday, the day I had planned to give them each a fortune. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my backyard, watching the stars and thinking about the past 30 years. After Mark left me for his secretary, such a cliche it almost hurt more, I'd thrown myself into 2 things, my career and my children. Principal by day, mother by night, weekend, and every moment in between. I'd attended every soccer game, every dance recital, every parent-teacher conference. I'd worked summers to afford braces and SAT prep courses. I'd downsized my home to help with Jennifer's wedding and Michael's graduate school tuition. When had they started seeing me as an obligation rather than a person? When had my birthday become something to avoid rather than celebrate? Morning. Found me still in the backyard, dew dampening my slippers. I felt oddly calm, like someone emerging from a long illness to find the world both familiar and strange. Jennifer called around 10. "Mom, how are you? Tyler's feeling much better today." "Is he?" I asked, my voice steady. That was quick for someone so sick you couldn't find a sitter. A pause. "Well, children bounce back fast. Especially when they're not actually sick at all, I imagine." Another longer pause. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I saw your symphony post, Jennifer." The silence stretched so long I checked to see if the call had dropped. Finally, her voice came back, defensive and slightly shrill. "I don't appreciate being spied on. Robert had these tickets for weeks. It was a special composer he loves. Tyler was with my in-laws. I didn't think you'd understand." "Understand what? That your father's birthday wasn't as important as a concert?" "Mom, you're being dramatic. It's just a birthday. We'll celebrate this weekend." Just a birthday. Just the day I'd planned to transform her life. "Don't bother," I said quietly and ended the call. Michael rang next, full of excuses about misunderstandings and dead phone batteries. I listened for a while, then simply asked, "Was golf enjoyable last night?" Like his sister, he quickly shifted from apologies to indignation. "Are you monitoring my social media now? That's crossing a line, Mom." "Is it? Is lying to your mother not crossing a line?" "Look, I had a rough week. The guys invited me out and I needed to decompress. It's not personal." Not personal. My birthday, my feelings, my importance in his life. None of it personal. "I understand," I said, and I did. Finally. After hanging up, I called my financial advisor. "I need to make some changes to my plans," I told him. Significant changes. That afternoon, I visited Carolyn Peters, an estate attorney I'd known, casually through my work at the school. Her office occupied the 2nd floor of a Victorian conversion downtown, with windows overlooking Springfield's modest skyline. "Susan," she greeted me warmly. "What brings you in today?" I explained my situation, the lottery win, my original plans, and what had transpired on my birthday. As I spoke, her expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught a flicker of something, sympathy perhaps, or recognition in her eyes. "You're not the first parent I've seen facing this kind of recalibration," she said carefully. "When children consistently demonstrate their priorities, sometimes the kindest thing, for everyone, is to believe them." "That's exactly it," I said, feeling understood for the first time in days. "I need to believe what they're showing me, not what I wish they were showing me." Over the next 2 hours, we drafted a new will and established a series of trusts with very different beneficiaries than I'd originally planned. I didn't cut Jennifer and Michael out entirely. They would each receive $100,000, a generous gift, but a far cry from the millions I'd intended. The bulk of my windfall would now be directed elsewhere. When I left Carolyn's office, this spring, air felt different. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Against my skin, lighter somehow, as if by redistributing my fortune, I'd also redistributed a weight I'd been carrying. 3 days later, both my children arrived at my door unannounced, wearing identical expressions of contrition. Jennifer clutched a belated birthday cake from an expensive bakery. Michael carried a large gift bag from a department store I could never have afforded to shop at before my win. "Surprise!" Jennifer sang out. "We're here to properly celebrate." I invited them in, offered coffee, and listened to their elaborate apologies. They were heartfelt, I had to admit, but something felt performative about their sudden appearance. "What prompted this visit?" I asked finally, setting down my cup. They exchanged glances. "We felt terrible about missing your birthday," Michael began. "Absolutely awful," Jennifer agreed quickly. "We know family should come first," Michael continued. I nodded slowly. "Nancy mentioned you both missed last year's birthday dinner as well, and the year before." They shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we're busy adults with complicated lives," Jennifer said, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "We can't always drop everything." "Of course not," I agreed. "I understand priorities." An awkward silence fell. Then Michael cleared his throat. "Actually, Mom, there was something we wanted to discuss with you." There it was. "We were talking," Jennifer picked up smoothly, "and we realized you're in this big house all alone. It's a lot to maintain at your age." My age. I was 64, not 94. "And property values in this neighborhood have gone up considerably," Michael added. "We thought maybe it's time to consider downsizing," Jennifer finished. "We could help you find a nice condo, something manageable." I sipped my coffee, studying them over the rim of my cup. My beautiful, accomplished children, who had somehow grown into adults who viewed me as an asset to be managed rather than a person. "To be loved. That's thoughtful," I said finally, "but I'm quite happy here." "But Mom," Jennifer pressed, "be practical. This place is worth at least $400,000 now. That could be your retirement fund." I almost laughed. If they only knew. "My retirement is secure," I said simply. "How can you be sure?" Michael asked, frowning. "Principals' pensions aren't exactly generous." For a moment, I was tempted to tell them everything, about the lottery, about the trusts I'd planned, to establish for them about how different this conversation would have been if they'd simply shown up for my birthday dinner. But something held me back. "I've made some good investments," I said instead. They exchanged another look. Skeptical, concerned, the way adult children look when they think a parent is being unrealistic. "Well, will you at least think about it?" Jennifer pressed. "For us, we worry about you." Did they? I wondered. Or did they worry about what would happen to my house, my savings, my possessions when I was gone? After they left, I stood in my kitchen, looking at the barely touched cake they'd brought. The frosting read, "Happy Birthday, Mom," in elaborate script, surrounded by decorative flowers. It was beautiful, expensive, and entirely impersonal. The kind of cake you grab when you're in a hurry and feeling guilty. The next day, I began the most extraordinary phase of my life. First, I renovated my home. Not to sell it, but to make it truly mine. I converted Michael's old bedroom into an art studio, something I'd always dreamed of having. Jennifer's room became a library, filled with books I'd always wanted to read but never had time for. I installed a garden hot tub, bought a piano, and hired a local college student to teach me to play. Then I established the Springfield Education Foundation with a $5 million endowment. As a former principal, I knew exactly where resources were most needed. Arts programs, special education support, technology upgrades, college scholarships for low-income students. The foundation would ensure that generations of children in our community would have opportunities my own children had taken for granted. I allocated another $1 million to the local hospital's oncology unit, where my sister Christine had received such compassionate care before cancer took her 3 years ago. Neither Jennifer nor Michael had visited their aunt more than once during her illness, always citing distance and busy schedules. The donation would fund a comfortable family room, where patients could spend quality time with loved ones who did show up. With another portion of my winnings, I established a trust for my 3 grandchildren that would activate when they turned 25. Old enough, I hoped, to appreciate the gift and use it wisely. This trust came with one condition. They had to demonstrate a pattern of community service and family commitment. I wouldn't make the same mistake twice, giving unconditionally to people who valued money over relationship. The remainder of my lottery winnings went into secure investments that would allow me to live comfortably while funding my newfound passions: travel, art, music, and philanthropy. Word of my donations eventually reached my children, though they remained unaware of their source. Jennifer called one evening, her voice tight with confusion. "Mom, Robert was at a hospital board meeting, and they mentioned a major donation to the oncology department from someone named Susan Miller. That's not you, is it?" "It is," I said simply. "But how? That would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. $1 million, actually." Silence. Then, "Mom, what's going on? Do you have a secret inheritance you never told us about?" "Something like that." "Why wouldn't you tell us? We're your children." The hurt in her voice seemed genuine, which only made it more painful. She wasn't upset that I'd kept a secret. She was upset that she hadn't known about money that might have been hers. "Jennifer, when was the last time you called me just to chat? Not about a favor or a family obligation, but just to see how I was doing?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Michael's reaction came next, in the form of an unexpected visit. He arrived unannounced on a Saturday morning, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Mom, what's this I hear about you donating millions to charity? Where did this money come from? Are you being scammed?" I invited him in, offered him coffee, and calmly explained that yes, I had come into a substantial sum, and yes, I was donating much of it to causes I believed in. "But why not tell us?" he demanded, pacing my newly renovated kitchen. "We could have helped you manage it, invest it properly." "The way you helped me manage my house?" I asked quietly. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "That was different. We were concerned about you." "Were you? When was the last time you were concerned enough to remember my birthday, Michael? Or to call just to check in? Or to help me when I had surgery last year and needed someone to drive me home from the hospital?" He stopped pacing. "You had surgery? When?" "Last May, a knee replacement. I told both you and Jennifer, but you were busy with work and she had a family vacation. Nancy drove me. She also brought me meals for a week while I recovered." Michael sank into a chair looking genuinely shocked. "I don't remember you telling me about any surgery." "That's my point," I said gently. "You and Jennifer have built lives where I exist on the periphery, someone to call on holidays, someone whose birthday can be missed without consequence, someone whose house might someday be an inheritance but whose actual life holds little interest." "That's not fair," he protested, but weakly. "Perhaps not. But it's how it feels from my side." After Michael left, I sat in my garden, watching butterflies flit between the flowers I'd planted. For decades, I'd measured my worth by how well I served others, my students, my children, my community. Somehow, along the way, I'd taught my children that I existed to serve them while expecting nothing in return. The changes in my life didn't go unnoticed in our small community. The local paper ran a feature about the anonymous angel behind the Education Foundation, though they respected my request not to be named. The hospital held a small ceremony to dedicate the new family room, which I attended quietly, standing in the back rather than taking the recognition I could have claimed. 6 months after my birthday revelation, I hosted a garden party. I invited neighbors, former colleagues, the young piano teacher who was now also a friend, several charity directors I'd come to know, and, after some deliberation, Jennifer and Michael with their families. My daughter arrived first, looking uncomfortable and out of place among people she didn't know. "Mom," she whispered, pulling me aside, "who are all these people?" "Friends," I said simply. She looked around at the lively gathering, clearly surprised. "I didn't realize you had so many friends." The way she said it, with genuine astonishment, told me everything about how she'd seen me. Not as a woman with her own relationships, interests, and identity, but merely as her mother, a role rather than a person. Michael arrived late, as usual. He navigated the crowd with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to networking, but I noticed his confusion as he realized he recognized almost no one at his own mother's party. As the evening progressed, I overheard snippets of conversation that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Susan's contribution to the children's art program has been transformative. I never would have pursued music again if Susan hadn't encouraged me. The scholarship fund Susan established has already helped 12 students attend college. I watched my children's expressions shift as they circulated, absorbing this new version of their mother. Not just a reliable babysitter or holiday host, but a woman of influence, generosity, and connection. Near the end of the evening, Jennifer approached me, her expression troubled. "Mom, I feel like I don't know you anymore." "Perhaps you never did," I replied, not unkindly. "But you could start now." "Why didn't you tell us about the money?" she asked. "Don't you trust us?" I considered her question carefully. "It's not about trust, Jennifer. It's about priorities. Mine have changed." "What does that mean for us?" Her voice was small, almost childlike. "It means I'm no longer organizing my life around being needed by children who have grown up. It means I'm living for myself now, and for the community that's supported me. It means I love you and Michael unconditionally, but my resources, whether that's time, energy, or money, are no longer unconditional." She looked stricken. "So we're being punished for missing your birthday?" "No, sweetheart. You're experiencing the natural consequence of the relationship you chose to have with me. If you want a different relationship moving forward, that door is always open." After the party, as I cleared away glasses and folded chairs, Nancy helped me carry platters into the kitchen. "You know," she said, loading the dishwasher, "I've known you for 11 years, and I've never seen you like this, so vibrant, so present." I smiled. "I feel present. For the first time in decades, I'm living my life instead of just managing it." "And your kids?" she asked cautiously. "How are they taking the new Susan?" "They're adjusting," I said. "Whether they adjust enough to be part of my life in a meaningful way is up to them." 2 months after my garden party, I received an unexpected invitation. The Springfield Arts Council was holding their annual gala, and they wanted me to attend as their guest of honor. The substantial donation I'd made to their youth outreach program had enabled them to bring arts education to 3 underserved schools in our district. I almost declined. I'd never been comfortable with public recognition. A lifetime of putting others first had trained me to stay in the background. But my piano teacher, Elise, convinced me otherwise. "You're not just accepting for yourself," she pointed out during our lesson. "You're setting an example for others with means to give back. Plus," she added with a smile, "it's a chance to wear that gorgeous blue dress you bought in Chicago and haven't had an occasion for." The night of the gala, I stood before my mirror, barely recognizing the woman reflected back. The blue dress draped elegantly over my frame, which had become leaner through the yoga classes I'd begun taking. My hair, recently styled in a modern C-cut, framed a face that looked somehow younger than it had a year ago, despite the passage of time. The doorbell rang just as I was fastening my mother's pearl earrings, the one valuable thing I'd inherited from her. I opened the door to find Nancy, stunning in a burgundy gown. "My designated driver," I said warmly, welcoming her in. "And moral support," she reminded me, "though you hardly need it these days." As we drove downtown to the Grand Hotel where the gala was being held, Nancy cast a sideways glance at me. "Have you told Jennifer and Michael about tonight?" I shook my head. "They've been distant since the garden party. I think they're still processing." "They might read about it in the paper," she warned. "The Arts Council events always get coverage." "Then they'll read about it," I said simply. I'm done managing their feelings about my choices. The ballroom was transformed, twinkling with lights and alive with conversation. As I entered, several people turned, smiling in recognition. The chair of the Arts Council, a distinguished woman named Victoria, whom I'd met recently, approached immediately. "Susan, I'm so glad you came. There are several people eager to meet you." For the next hour, I was introduced to artists, educators, philanthropists, people who shared my passion for bringing creativity and beauty to children's lives. For so long, my social circle had been limited to my children's friends' parents, former colleagues, and a few neighbors. Now, suddenly, I was part of a vibrant community united by purpose rather than proximity or obligation. During dinner, seated at a table near the front, I glanced around the room and froze. There, at a table near the back, sat Robert, Jennifer's husband. He was with several colleagues from his architecture firm, which apparently sponsored the event annually. He hadn't seen me yet, focused on whatever conversation was happening at his table. Just as I was deciding whether to acknowledge him or not, the lights dimmed and Victoria took the stage. After a brief recap of the Arts Council's accomplishments, over the past year, she said, "Tonight, we honor someone whose generosity has transformed our ability to reach children throughout Springfield." As she continued with a summary of the youth outreach program and its impact, I felt a curious mixture of embarrassment and pride. Then suddenly, "Please join me in welcoming our guest of honor, Susan Miller." The spotlight found me, and applause filled the room. As I made my way to the stage, I caught Robert's stunned expression. He was half standing, his mouth slightly open in shock. I accepted the Crystal Award with thanks, then spoke briefly about my time as a principal and how I'd seen firsthand the difference arts education made in children's development and confidence. "Every child deserves beauty in their life," I concluded. "Every child deserves the chance to express themselves, to discover talents they might never otherwise know they possess." The applause was warm and genuine. As I returned to my seat, I noticed Robert was no longer at his table. He was waiting for me when I stepped off the stage. "Susan," he said, his usual polished confidence noticeably absent. "I had no idea." You were amazing up there. Thank you, Robert. Jennifer didn't mention you were involved with the Arts Council. His tone suggested this was a significant omission. Jennifer doesn't know, I said simply. His brow furrowed. But you're the guest of honor. This is a major event. Yes, it is. And yet, not everything I do needs to be filtered through my relationship with my children. I smiled to soften the words. Are you enjoying the evening? He nodded, still looking confused. Our firm sponsors a table every year. It's good for business. He paused. Susan, may I ask, this program you funded, it must have cost. A considerable amount, I confirmed. It was worth every penny. Later that night, as Nancy and I were preparing to leave, Robert approached again. Susan, would you mind if I gave you a ride home? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. I glanced at Nancy, who raised an eyebrow. I'll be fine, she assured me. My house is in the opposite direction anyway. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Robert's luxury sedan as he navigated the quiet streets toward my neighborhood. Jennifer told me you'd come into some money, he began awkwardly. But I had no idea it was of this magnitude. I didn't respond, waiting for him to continue. She's hurt, he said after a moment. She feels you don't trust them. That's not it, I replied. But I'm curious, Robert. Why are you acting as an intermediary here? This seems like something Jennifer should discuss with me directly if she has concerns. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. To be honest, I'm worried about her. She's been different since your garden party. Withdrawn, questioning everything. Last week, she turned down a major client because they wanted her to work weekends for the next 3 months. She's never done that before. I considered this information carefully. And that concerns you? It's not like her, he said. She's always been driven, focused on her career. Now suddenly she's talking about balance and having time for family. That sounds healthy to me. He sighed. It is, I suppose, but it's also confusing. I feel like something fundamental has shifted, and I don't fully understand why or how. As we pulled into my driveway, I turned to face him. Robert, for most of Jennifer's adult life, she's had a model of womanhood, me, that prioritized everyone else's needs above her own. Now she's seeing a different possibility. That's bound to raise questions. He nodded slowly. I guess I never thought of it that way. He paused, then added hesitantly, There's something else. I don't know if I should tell you this, but Jennifer and Michael have been meeting with an attorney. My stomach tightened. What kind of attorney? Estate law, I think. Something about protective measures for elderly relatives. He looked genuinely uncomfortable now. I overheard them discussing whether there were grounds for some kind of competency hearing. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. They think I'm incompetent because I'm spending my own money the way I choose? I think they're concerned about the scale of the donations, he said carefully, and maybe about how. Different you seem lately. Different, I repeated flatly. You mean independent? Making my own decisions? He had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm just telling you what I know. After seeing you tonight, how poised you were, how articulate, it's obvious their concerns are unfounded. I thanked him for the ride and the information, then stood in my driveway watching his taillights disappear around the corner. The warm glow of the evening had evaporated, replaced by a cold knot of anger and betrayal. Competency hearing? Protective measures? As if I were a child or a senile old woman incapable of managing my own affairs. Inside my house, I paced the living room, too agitated to sleep. Part of me wanted to call them immediately, to confront them with what I'd learned. But a cooler, more strategic part of my mind prevailed. Better to understand exactly what they were planning before I showed my hand. The next morning, I called Carolyn Peters, my estate attorney. "I need to see you as soon as possible," I told her. "It's urgent." She cleared her schedule and met me within the hour. In her office, I relayed what Robert had told me, watching her expression shift from professional neutrality to indignation. "This is outrageous," she said finally. "You're one of the most mentally acute clients I have. There's absolutely no grounds for questioning your competence." "But could they try anyway?" I pressed. She considered this carefully. "They could file a petition, yes. It would require evidence of impairment, medical evaluations, testimony from people familiar with your daily functioning. But Susan, even attempting this would be an extreme step. Are you sure Robert understood correctly?" "I'm not sure of anything," I admitted, "except that I need to protect myself." Over the next 2 hours, we discussed options. Carolyn recommended a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation immediately, not because there was any question of my mental status, but to establish a clear baseline record of my competence. She also suggested I document all financial decisions with meticulous care and consider setting up a revocable trust with a corporate trustee as a co-trustee, which would provide an additional layer of oversight without surrendering my autonomy. "And what about my will?" I asked. "Can they contest that after I'm gone?" "They can try," she said. "But if we take proper precautions now, it would be very difficult for them to succeed." I left her office with a plan and a renewed sense of purpose. If my children wanted a fight, they would get one, but on my terms, not theirs. That afternoon, I made 3 appointments, with a neuropsychologist recommended by Carolyn, with my primary care physician for a complete physical and cognitive assessment, and with a videographer to record a statement explaining my decisions regarding my estate. I also did something I'd never done before. I called a locksmith to change all the locks on my house. Jennifer and Michael both had keys, given to them years ago for emergencies. Now, I realized those keys represented a vulnerability I could no longer afford. As the locksmith worked, my phone rang. It was Jennifer. "Mom," she began, her voice oddly formal. "Michael and I would like to meet with you tomorrow. There's something important we need to discuss." "Is that so?" I kept my tone neutral, giving nothing away. "What time were you thinking?" "Around noon? We could bring lunch." "Noon is fine," I agreed. "But don't bother with lunch. This won't take long." After hanging up, I called Nancy. "I need a favor," I told her, "and it's an unusual one." Following day, I was waiting in my living room when Jennifer and Michael arrived precisely at noon. I answered the door but didn't invite them in immediately. "Before we start," I said, "you should know that Nancy is here as a witness to our conversation. She's in the kitchen." They exchanged startled glances. "A witness?" Michael repeated. "Mom, what's going on?" "That's what I'd like to know," I replied evenly. "Please come in." I led them to the living room where I'd arranged seating, 3 chairs positioned to face each other, no cozy sofa grouping that might suggest familial intimacy. This was a negotiation, not a reunion. "Robert told me about your meetings with an attorney," I said without preamble once we were seated. "About your plans to question my competence." Their faces registered matching expressions of shock, followed quickly by guilt on Jennifer's part and defensive anger on Michael's. "I can't believe he told you that," Jennifer muttered. "He betrayed our confidence," Michael added, his face flushing. "Interesting that your first concern is about being exposed, not about the fact that you were plotting behind my back." I kept my voice calm, though my heart was racing. "So it's true then?" Jennifer looked miserable. "Mom, we're worried about you. The changes in your behavior, these massive donations, this sudden secrecy about your finances. It's not like you." "What Jennifer means," Michael interjected, "is that we want to make sure you're being properly advised, that no one is taking advantage of your generosity." taking advantage, I repeated slowly. The way you've taken advantage of my generosity. For decades. Michael flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? I leaned forward. Let me be absolutely clear about something. I am of sound mind. I am making informed choices about my own resources, and I will not tolerate any attempt to interfere with my autonomy. Mom! Jennifer began, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. Yesterday, I underwent a complete neuropsychological evaluation. I also had a physical examination, including cognitive testing. Both showed I am functioning at a high level with no impairment of any kind. I have documentation of all this, which I've already provided to my attorney. Their expressions shifted from defensive to confused. You knew we were coming today, Michael said slowly. How? Robert told me about your meetings with the attorney, I reminded him. It wasn't hard to guess what would follow. So you preemptively got tested, Jennifer said, sounding almost impressed despite herself. That was strategic. I've also changed the locks, I continued, reaching into my pocket to produce 2 new keys. These are for emergencies only. Real emergencies, not your convenience or curiosity. I expect you to respect my privacy. They accepted the keys silently, looking somewhat stunned by this turn of events. Now, I said, standing, to indicate our meeting was concluding, is there anything else you wanted to discuss? They rose automatically, clearly thrown off by the brevity and directness of our encounter. Actually, yes, Michael said, finding his voice. We wanted to invite you to Thanksgiving dinner at my house. Emma and James would love to see you. The normalcy of the invitation in the context of what had just transpired was almost laughable. I'll consider it, I said neutrally. Thank you for the invitation. After they left, Nancy emerged from the kitchen where she'd been listening to the entire exchange. Wow, she said simply. You didn't pull any punches. I couldn't afford to, I replied, suddenly exhausted. They needed to understand that I'm not a doddering old woman they can manage or manipulate. They definitely got that message, Nancy agreed. But Susan, where does this leave your relationship with them? Can you move forward from here? It was a question I'd been asking myself since Robert's revelation. I don't know, I admitted. I hope so, eventually. But it has to be on different terms. Mutual respect, genuine interest, real connection. Not obligation, not inheritance expectations, not managing the inconvenient aging parent. Nancy squeezed my hand sympathetically. If anyone can forge a new path, it's you. You've already come so far. That evening, I sat in my garden, watching twilight settle over the flowers and shrubs I'd planted that spring. The beauty I'd created here gave me a deeper pleasure than any of the expensive gifts I'd lavished on my children over the years. This garden was the expression of myself, my taste, my vision, my care. It existed for its own sake, not as a service to someone else's needs or wants. I wondered if that was what frightened my children most about my transformation. Not the money itself, but the fact that I was reclaiming my life as my own, creating boundaries they couldn't cross, making choices that didn't center them. For so long, I had been defined entirely by my relationship to them. Now, I was finally becoming a whole person in my own right, and they didn't know how to relate to this new version of their mother. A week passed with no contact from either Jennifer or Michael. I continued with my routines, yoga classes, piano lessons, volunteer work at the Youth Arts Center, but with a heightened awareness of my vulnerability. I found myself checking over my shoulder in parking lots, scrutinizing unfamiliar cars that drove slowly past my house, questioning whether the kids really needed to know my daily schedule. It was an exhausting way to live, this constant vigilance. And unfair, I realized with growing indignation. I had done nothing wrong, nothing to justify being treated as incompetent or unstable. I had simply claimed my right to make my own decisions about my own life. 10 days after our confrontation, Jennifer called. "Mom," she began without preamble, "I owe you an apology." I remained silent, waiting. What Michael and I were considering. "It was wrong," she continued. "Disrespectful and unnecessary. I see that now." "What changed your mind?" I asked, genuinely curious. She sighed heavily. "Talking to you that day, seeing how prepared you were, how clear about your boundaries, and honestly, because Robert refused to participate. He said after seeing you at the gala, there was no question about your competence or judgment." "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully. "But Jennifer, this isn't just about that specific action. It's about a pattern of relating to me as someone to be managed rather than respected." "I know," she admitted softly. "I've been thinking a lot about that. About how I've taken you for granted, assumed you existed primarily in relation to me and my needs." She paused. "It's not an excuse, but I think part of it comes from how you raised us. You were always so available, so focused on us. I never learned to see you as separate from your role as my mother." Her insight surprised me. "That's very perceptive," I acknowledged. "And you're right, I contributed to that dynamic. But now I'm changing it, and I need you to change with me." "I want to," she said, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. "I really do. Can we try again? Maybe lunch, just the two of us?" We arranged to meet the following day at a small cafe downtown. When I arrived, Jennifer was already there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. She stood to greet me, giving me an awkward but genuine hug before we sat down. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she admitted. "Why wouldn't I?" "Because I violated your trust in a fundamental way." She looked down at her hands. "If someone had done that to me, I'm not sure I'd be willing to sit across a table from them so soon." "You're my daughter," I said simply. "That doesn't excuse what happened, but it does mean I'm willing to work through it, if you are." We ordered lunch, and for a while the conversation stayed safely in neutral territory. The unseasonably warm weather, a book she'd been reading, my new piano piece. But as our meal progressed, Jennifer's expression grew more serious. "Mom, can I ask you something?" she ventured. "About the money?" I tensed slightly but nodded. "Where did it come from? I know you said it was an inheritance of sorts, but it must have been substantial. Was it from someone we knew?" I considered my response carefully. I wasn't ready to tell her about the lottery. Not yet. That revelation would come when, if we rebuilt enough trust. "It was unexpected," I said. "Finally. A windfall that came at a time when I was reassessing many aspects of my life." She accepted this vague explanation with a nod. "And the foundation, the hospital donation, those were your ideas? Things you wanted to support?" "Absolutely," I confirmed. "I chose causes that mattered to me personally. Education because of my career, oncology because of Aunt Christine's experience." "I should have visited her more," Jennifer said suddenly, her eyes filling with tears. "When she was sick, I always meant to, but there was always some reason not to make the trip." She wiped at her eyes. "I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm crying about this now." "Maybe because you're starting to see patterns in your own behavior," I suggested gently. "Ways you might want to change." She nodded, blinking back tears. "I don't want to be the person who's always too busy for what really matters. But sometimes, I don't even know what really matters anymore." Her vulnerability touched me. For the first time in our adult relationship, Jennifer was speaking to me not as a daughter to a mother, but as one woman to another, sharing her genuine confusion and regret. "I think that's something we all have to keep figuring out," I told her. "What matters shifts as life changes. The challenge is to keep checking in with ourselves, to make sure our choices align with our actual values, not just our habits or others' expectations. "How did you get so wise?" she asked with a watery smile. "The hard way," I replied honestly, "by making plenty of mistakes first." As we parted after lunch, Jennifer hugged me again, this time more naturally. "Thank you for giving me another chance," she said. "I won't betray your trust again." "I believe you," I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. My rapprochement with Michael took longer and followed a different path. 2 weeks after our confrontation, I received a formal letter from him. Not an email or text, but an actual letter written on heavyweight stationery and delivered to my mailbox. "Dear Mom," it began. "I've started this letter a dozen times, struggling to find the right words. What Jennifer and I contemplated doing was wrong, a fundamental breach of trust and respect. There's no excuse for it, though I've tried to create several in my own mind to justify our actions." He went on to explain the thinking that had led to consulting the attorney, their concern about the sudden change in my behavior, worry that someone might be influencing my financial decisions, fear that I might impoverish myself through unchecked generosity. "But all of these concerns masked something else," he continued. "A deeper discomfort with seeing you become someone we don't recognize, someone with her own priorities, boundaries, and vision, someone who exists independently of her relationship to us." The letter concluded with a straightforward apology and a request, not for forgiveness, he emphasized, but for the opportunity to begin rebuilding trust. I read the letter several times, touched by its thoughtfulness and apparent sincerity. The Michael I knew had always been quick to defend himself, reluctant to admit error. This level of self-reflection and accountability was new. I called him the next day. "I got your letter," I said when he answered. "I meant every word," he replied quietly. "I know you did. Thank you." A slightly awkward silence followed, neither of us quite sure how to move forward from here. "Emma's school is having their fall concert next Thursday," he said finally. "She has a small solo in the choir portion. She'd love it if you could come." It was a peace offering, not a private meeting where we'd have to navigate difficult conversation, but a family event where we could begin the slow work of reconnection through the buffer of his children. "I'd be happy to attend," I told him. The night of the concert, I arrived early, finding a seat near the middle of the auditorium where I'd have a good view of the stage. To my surprise, Michael appeared a few minutes later, scanning the crowd, until he spotted me. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty seat beside me. "Melissa had to take James home. He's coming down with something. She'll pick Emma up after the performance." "Of course," I agreed, moving my purse from the adjacent seat. We sat in companionable silence as the auditorium filled around us. It was oddly reminiscent of countless school events we'd attended together when he was a child. Concerts, plays, awards ceremonies where I'd beam with pride at his accomplishments. "Thank you for coming," he said as the lights dimmed. "It means a lot to Emma, to all of us." The concert was charming in the way all elementary school performances are. Earnest if occasionally off-key, with moments of surprising beauty interspersed with endearing awkwardness. Emma's solo was brief but sweet, her clear voice rising confidently above the choir. I found myself blinking back unexpected tears. "She has real talent," I whispered to Michael. He nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Takes after her grandmother. Remember how you used to sing to us at bedtime?" I was touched that he remembered. It had been years, decades, since I'd thought about those nightly rituals, the lullabies and folk songs I'd croon as I tucked them in. After the concert, we waited together for Emma in the school lobby. When she spotted us, she ran over, still. In her performance dress, face flushed with excitement. "Grandma, Dad, did you hear my solo? Was I good?" I was so nervous, but then I remembered what Ms. Wilson said about breathing, and I wasn't nervous anymore. "You were wonderful, sweetheart," I assured her, accepting her enthusiastic hug. "I'm so proud of you." "Dad, can Grandma come get ice cream with us? Please? Ms. Wilson said we could celebrate because we worked so hard." Michael glanced at me questioningly. "Would you like to join us, just for a little while?" The invitation felt significant, an extension of our tentative reconnection beyond the bounds of the concert itself. "I'd love to," I said. At the ice cream parlor, Emma chattered happily about her friends, her classes, her upcoming science project. Michael and I mostly listened, offering occasional questions or comments, our own interactions still slightly cautious, but increasingly comfortable. As Emma finished her sundae, she asked unexpectedly, "Grandma, can I come see your art studio sometime? Dad said you're painting again." I looked at Michael in surprise. He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Emma's been showing interest in art. I mentioned you'd started painting again, and she's been curious ever since." "I'd be happy to show you my studio," I told her. "Maybe this weekend if your dad agrees?" "Saturday would work," Michael said. "Maybe around 10? I could drop her off for a couple of hours while I run some errands." It was another small step forward, Michael trusting me with his daughter, creating space for a relationship between us that wasn't filtered through him. "Perfect," I agreed. As we parted in the parking lot, Michael hesitated, then said quietly, "This was nice, Mom. Thank you for coming." I enjoyed it, I assured him. And I had, not just Emma's performance, but the simple pleasure of being included in their lives without expectation or obligation on either side. Saturday morning, Emma arrived promptly at 10, bubbling with excitement about seeing my art house, as she called it. Michael lingered briefly at the door, reiterating when he'd return and making sure I had his cell number in case of any issues. "We'll be fine," I assured him. "Go run your errands. Emma and I have important artist business to discuss." For the next 2 hours, I showed Emma my studio, explaining different techniques and materials, letting her try watercolors and acrylics, even allowing her to add a small flower to the corner of a landscape I was working on. "Can I come again?" she asked as we cleaned brushes together. "Maybe next time you could teach me how to draw people? I'm not very good at faces." "I'd like that very much," I told her. "We could make it a regular thing if you want." Saturday. Morning art lessons with Grandma. Her face lit up. "Really? Every Saturday?" "If your parents agree, and if you're really interested, art takes practice and patience." "I am interested," she insisted. "And Dad already said it was okay. He thinks it's cool that you paint. He has that picture you gave him for his birthday hanging in his office." I blinked in surprise. I'd given Michael a small watercolor of the lake where we used to vacation when he was a child, but I had no idea he'd displayed it at work. He'd thanked me politely at the time, but I'd assumed it had been tucked away, in a drawer somewhere. When Michael returned to pick Emma up, she immediately launched into an excited recounting of everything we'd done, showing him the small canvas she'd painted under my guidance. "Grandma says I can come every Saturday for art lessons. She's going to teach me how to draw faces next time." Michael raised an eyebrow at me. "Every Saturday? Are you sure, Mom? That's a big commitment." "I'd enjoy it," I said simply, "if it works for your family schedule." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "It would be great for Emma, and for you two to have that time together." As they prepared to leave, Emma ran back to the studio to collect a paintbrush she'd forgotten. Michael turned to me, his expression suddenly serious. "I need to apologize for something else," he said quietly. "After our confrontation, I did something I'm not proud of. I hired a private investigator to look into your finances." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. "I know," he continued, looking genuinely ashamed. "It was a massive invasion of your privacy. A continuation of exactly the controlling behavior you called us out for." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked when I found my voice. Because I've spent weeks trying to rebuild trust with you, all while keeping this secret. It felt hypocritical, dishonest, and because the investigator found something I think you should know about. My heart raced. Had he discovered the lottery win? Was all this renewed connection, the concert invitation, Emma's art lessons, just a ploy to get back into my good graces before confronting me? The foundation you established, he continued, the education one. There's an issue with one of the administrators, a man named James Davidson. He's been embezzling funds, small amounts, disguised as administrative expenses, but it's adding up. The investigator found irregularities in the financial reports. This was not at all what I'd expected. How much money are we talking about? Around $50,000 so far, Michael replied. He's clever about it, spreading the withdrawals across different budget categories. But there's a pattern once you know what to look for. I sank into a chair, trying to process this information. I trusted him, I said finally. The foundation board vetted him thoroughly. He came with excellent references. People like that usually do, Michael said grimly. Look, I know you have no reason to trust my judgment on this, given how I've behaved. But I've compiled the evidence the investigator found. You can take it to the board, have them conduct their own audit. Or to the police, if you prefer. Emma bounded back into the room, clutching her forgotten paintbrush. Found it. Can we go now, Dad? You promised we'd stop for tacos on the way home. Michael's expression immediately shifted. The concerned adult replaced by the patient father. Yes, sweetheart. Say thank you to Grandma for today. Emma threw her arms around me in an exuberant hug. Thank you, Grandma. See you next Saturday. After they left, I sat for a long time with the file Michael had given me, torn between anger at his intrusion into my affairs and gratitude for the warning about Davidson. Finally, I called Victoria, the Arts Council chair who had become a friend. I need your advice, I told her, and possibly your help. The next week was a whirlwind of meetings, with the foundation board, with forensic accountants, finally, with the police. Michael's information proved accurate. Davidson had indeed been systematically siphoning funds, and the evidence was strong enough to justify criminal charges. Throughout the process, I was struck by the support that rallied around me. Victoria and other board members expressed outrage on my behalf and determination to strengthen oversight procedures. My financial advisors provided documentation and expertise. Even Carolyn, my estate attorney, offered legal guidance regarding potential recovery of the stolen funds. In the midst of this crisis, I found myself surrounded by a community I hadn't possessed a year earlier, people who valued me for my contributions, my insights, my friendship. It was a stark contrast to the isolation I'd experienced following Mark's departure, when my entire support system had consisted of two small children who needed me more than I needed them. The Thursday after Davidson's arrest, Michael called. I saw the news, he said without preamble. Are you okay? I'm managing, I assured him. It's been intense, but we caught it before too much damage was done. I'm glad, he said. Then, after a pause, I know I crossed a line by investigating your finances. I can only imagine how violated that made you feel. It did, I acknowledged. But in this case, your interference had a positive outcome. Davidson might have stolen much more if you hadn't caught it. That doesn't justify what I did, he insisted. I want to be clear about that. Just because it worked out this time doesn't mean it was right. His self-awareness surprised me. The Michael I'd known had always been quick to justify his actions, to find the angle that put him in the right. This accountability was new and refreshing. Thank you for that, I said softly, and for being honest with me about the investigation. You could have just given me the information about Davidson without admitting how you got it. I'm trying to do better, he said simply, to be worthy of your trust again. After we hung up, I reflected on the irony of the situation. My children's attempt to control me, hiring a private investigator to scrutinize my finances, had ultimately protected me from someone else's exploitation. It didn't excuse their behavior, but it did complicate the narrative I'd been constructing about their motives. Perhaps their concern, however misguided and disrespectfully expressed, had contained a kernel of genuine care. Perhaps what I'd interpreted as purely self-interested worry about their inheritance had also included real concern for my welfare. The following Saturday, Emma arrived promptly for her art lesson, bubbling with excitement about learning to draw faces. As promised, I showed her basic proportions, how to place features correctly, the importance of shadow and light in creating dimension. "You're a good teacher, Grandma," she observed as she carefully erased a too large nose on her practice portrait. "Did you teach art when you were a principal?" "No, sweetheart. I supervised the teachers, managed the school. I didn't teach classes myself." She considered this thoughtfully. "Do you like painting better than being a principal?" "They're different," I explained. "Being a principal was about helping lots of children learn and grow. Painting is something I do just for myself because it brings me joy." "That's important too," she said with unexpected wisdom. "Dad says everyone needs something that's just for them. His is woodworking. He makes things in the garage when he's stressed." I hadn't known Michael had taken up woodworking. It was just one of many things I realized that I didn't know about my adult children's lives, their hobbies, their daily routines, their private passions. For so long, our interactions had been limited to surface-level updates and practical matters. We'd never developed the habit of sharing the more intimate details of our inner lives. "What does your mom do that's just for her?" I asked, curious about how Jennifer presented herself to her daughter. Emma thought for a moment. "She runs, really early in the morning, before everyone's awake. She says it's the only time her brain is quiet." This, too, was new information. I'd known Jennifer jogged occasionally, but I hadn't realized it held such significance for her, that she carved time from her busy schedule specifically for this solitary pursuit. "It's good that you notice these things about your parents," I told Emma. "Sometimes grown-ups forget to tell each other what matters to them, but you're paying attention." When Michael arrived to pick Emma up, I invited him in for coffee, something I hadn't done since our confrontation weeks earlier. "Emma tells me you're a woodworker," I said as I poured him a cup. "I had no idea." He looked slightly embarrassed. "It's just a hobby, nothing serious." "What do you make?" "Small things mostly. Boxes, picture frames. I made a jewelry box for Melissa's birthday last year." He paused, then added, "Actually, I'm working on something for you, for Christmas. But don't tell Emma I said that. She's terrible with secrets." The idea that he was crafting something specifically for me, planning ahead for Christmas, touched me deeply. It suggested a thoughtfulness I hadn't allowed myself to see in him lately. "I'd love to see your workshop sometime," I said. "If you're comfortable with that." He looked surprised, then pleased. "Sure, anytime." As he gathered Emma's art supplies, he hesitated, then said, "Mom, Jennifer and I were talking. We usually do Thanksgiving at her house, but this year we thought, maybe we could do it here? If you're willing to host again?" The request caught me off guard. After everything that had happened, they wanted to return to the tradition of gathering at my home for the holiday? "You don't have to answer right now," he added quickly, misinterpreting my silence. "We know it's a lot of work. We'd help, of course." "It's not that," I assured him. "I'm just surprised, given how strained things have been between us." He nodded, understanding. "That's exactly why we thought of it. A fresh start, maybe? Back on your territory, but with us contributing more, not just showing up and expecting you to handle everything." I considered his offer. There was something appealing about reclaiming the holiday tradition, but on new terms, not as the self-sacrificing mother desperate for her children's approval, but as a woman choosing to welcome her family into her say. home as equals. "I'd like that," I said finally, "but with some changes. We'll plan the meal together, share the cooking, make it a true collaboration." "Absolutely," he agreed readily. "Jennifer's already talking about which dishes she wants to make." After they left, I sat in my studio, pondering this unexpected development. Were we really rebuilding our relationship, creating something healthier and more balanced? Or was this just a temporary adjustment, my children accommodating my new assertiveness until they could re-establish the old, comfortable patterns? Only time would tell. But for now, I chose to embrace the possibility of genuine change. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving brought a flurry of activity. True to their word, Jennifer and Michael were fully engaged in the planning process, offering to handle specific dishes, discussing timing and logistics, even arranging for a cleaning service to come the day before and after the gathering. "You shouldn't have to scrub floors and bathrooms for a dinner we all enjoy," Jennifer insisted when I protested this last item. "It's ridiculous that we've let you do that all these years." The night before Thanksgiving, my kitchen hummed with unusual activity. Jennifer had arrived with several prepared dishes that only needed reheating, plus ingredients for the cranberry sauce she planned to make fresh in the morning. Michael was designating serving dishes, creating a detailed plan for how everything would be staged and served. "Mom, where do you keep the gravy boat?" he called from the dining room where he was setting the table. "Second cabinet on the left. Top shelf," I replied automatically, then paused. "Actually, I'm not sure we need it this year. I'm not making turkey." Both Jennifer and Michael stopped what they were doing to stare at me. "Not making turkey?" Jennifer repeated, as if I'd announced I was canceling the holiday entirely. "But it's Thanksgiving." "I know," I said calmly, "but I've been making the same meal for 30 years. This year, I thought I'd try something different. I'm doing a Mediterranean-themed menu, lamb with rosemary and garlic, roasted vegetables with feta, that sort of thing." They exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by this departure from tradition. "Is that a problem?" I asked, watching their reactions carefully. Michael recovered first. "Not at all. It sounds delicious, actually. I was just surprised." "It's not Thanksgiving without your stuffing, though," Jennifer said, looking genuinely disappointed. "The kids look forward to it all year." I hadn't considered that my children might have their own attachments to the traditional meal, that they might genuinely value certain dishes beyond their role in maintaining comforting family rituals. "I could still make the stuffing," I offered. "It would pair well enough with the lamb." Jennifer brightened. "That would be perfect. And maybe pumpkin pie? Tyler talks about your pie for weeks afterward." "Of course," I agreed. "Some traditions are worth keeping." As we continued preparing for the next day's feast, I found myself appreciating this new dynamic. The give and take, the negotiation of preferences, the recognition that each of us had legitimate desires and attachments. It felt like the beginning of something healthier, more balanced, a family relating as adults rather than through ossified parent-child patterns. Thanksgiving Day itself unfolded with surprising ease. The Mediterranean menu was a hit, especially with Robert, who turned out to have spent a semester in Greece during college. The children were initially skeptical, but won over by the tender lamb and honey-drizzled baklava I'd added to the dessert options. Most remarkable was the shift in responsibilities. Instead of me doing everything while others chatted in the living room, tasks were distributed organically throughout the day. Jennifer managed the kitchen cleanup after the meal. Michael kept the children entertained with games and stories. Robert, to everyone's surprise, turned out to be skilled at making specialty coffees to accompany dessert. As the evening wound down, with the children drowsing on the couch and the adults lingering over wine at the cleared dining table, Jennifer raised her glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, her cheeks flushed with wine and warmth. "To Mom, for hosting us again after everything, and for showing us that change can be good, even when it's uncomfortable at first. To Mom, Michael and Robert echoed, raising their glasses. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, not from the sentimentality of the moment, but from the recognition in Jennifer's words. She was acknowledging, publicly, that my transformation over the past year had ultimately been positive, not just for me, but for all of us. Later, as they were gathering coats and leftovers, Michael hung back, waiting until the others had stepped outside before approaching me. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," he said, his expression serious. "That private investigator I hired, he found something else, something I've been wrestling with whether to tell you." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" He hesitated, then said quickly, "He found information about Dad, about where he is now, what he's doing." Of all the things Michael might have discovered, this was perhaps the last I'd expected. Mark had been out of my life for so long, I rarely thought about him beyond the occasional passing reminder. "Why would that matter to me?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "That's what I couldn't decide," Michael admitted. "Whether you'd want to know, or if it would just reopen old wounds." I considered his question carefully. Did I want information about my ex-husband's current circumstances? Would it benefit me in any way to know how his life had unfolded in the decades since our divorce? "I don't need to know," I said finally. "That chapter of my life is completely closed. Has been for years." Michael nodded, looking relieved. That's what I thought. But with everything changing so much lately, I wasn't sure. As he turned to go, a question occurred to me. "Why were you looking into your father's situation at all? Were you planning to reconnect with him?" He shook his head firmly. "No. The investigator found it incidentally while looking into your finances. Some connection through old records, I guess. Jennifer and I haven't had contact with Dad in years, and we don't plan to change that." After they'd all gone and the house had settled into quiet, I poured myself a final glass of wine and sat in the living room, reflecting on the day. It had been lovely, genuinely lovely, in a way I hadn't anticipated. Not perfect, not without moments of tension or old patterns trying to reassert themselves, but overall, a hopeful indication that new, healthier relationships were possible. And yet, Michael's revelation about Mark nagged at me. Not because I cared about my ex-husband's current situation, but because it highlighted how much remained unspoken between me and my children. They knew so little of the real story of my marriage and divorce, of the pain and struggle that had shaped their childhood. I had protected them from those truths, believing it was my job to shield them from adult complexities. But they were adults now. Perhaps it was time for greater honesty, for the full story rather than the sanitized version I'd maintained all these years. The following week, as Emma and I worked on portraits in my studio, Michael called to check when he should. "Pick her up." "Actually," I said impulsively, "I was thinking of taking Emma out for ice cream after our lesson. If that's okay with you, of course." "Sure," he agreed readily. "That would be great. She loves spending time with you." After we hung up, Emma looked at me excitedly. "Are we really getting ice cream?" "We are," I confirmed. "But first, I want to show you something." I led her to the living room bookshelf where I kept old photo albums. Pulling down one labeled 1980-1985, I sat beside her on the couch. "These are pictures from when your dad was a little boy," I explained, opening to the first page. "And here's your Aunt Jennifer. See, she was just a baby here." Emma leaned in, fascinated by these glimpses of her father as a child. "Dad looks funny with that haircut," she giggled, pointing to a school photo of Michael with a distinctly 80s bowl cut. We turned pages, moving through the early years of the twins' lives, birthday parties, first days of school, summer vacations at the lake. Emma asked questions about each image, delighted by stories of her father's childhood antics and her aunt's early perfectionism. "Who's that man?" she asked suddenly, pointing to a rare photo that included Mark, a family portrait taken when the twins were about 5. "That's your grandfather, Mark," I explained. "Your dad and Aunt Jennifer's father." "My first husband?" She studied the image thoughtfully. "How come we never see him, like we see Grandpa Dave?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain the complexities of divorce and estrangement to a 10-year-old. "Sometimes families change," I said finally. "Your grandfather Mark and I separated when your dad was quite young, and eventually they lost touch with each other." "That's sad," Emma observed, her face serious. "I'd be sad if I couldn't see Dad anymore." "It is sad," I agreed. "But families come in all different shapes, and sometimes the shape changes over time." We continued through the album, Emma asking occasional questions about Mark, but primarily focused on stories about her father and aunt. When we reached the end, she asked if there were more pictures, so I retrieved another album, this one covering the twins' middle school years. By the time we left for ice cream, Emma had received a thorough education in her family history, or at least the version of it appropriate for a child her age. She seemed to accept the simplified explanation of her grandfather's absence without further questions, more interested in stories about her father's childhood baseball tournaments and her aunt's dance recitals. As we walked to the ice cream shop, Emma slipped her small hand into mine with easy affection. "Thanks for showing me those pictures, Grandma. It's cool to see what Dad was like when he was a kid." "You're welcome, sweetheart. Maybe next time we can look at pictures of your mom when she was young. I have some from when she and your dad first started dating." She nodded enthusiastically. "I'd like that. Mom doesn't have many old pictures. She says they got lost in a move." At the ice cream shop, as Emma happily devoured a brownie sundae, I found myself studying her features, noting which ones came from Michael, which from Melissa, which seemed entirely her own unique expression. The continuity of family through generations suddenly struck me with unexpected force. How certain expressions, mannerisms, even talents echoed through time, connecting us to those who came before and those who would follow. When Michael arrived to pick her up, Emma immediately launched into an excited recounting of our afternoon. "Grandma showed me all these old pictures of you and Aunt Jennifer when you were kids. You had the funniest haircut in 2nd grade, and there was one of you falling out of a canoe." Michael raised an eyebrow at me. "The infamous canoe incident? I thought we agreed that evidence was supposed to remain buried." "Statute of limitations," I replied with a smile. "Besides, Emma deserves to know her father wasn't always the dignified adult he pretends to be now." "Dignified? Me?" Michael laughed. "I think you have me confused with someone else." He turned to Emma. "Did you thank Grandma for the ice cream?" "Yes, Dad," she said, rolling her eyes at the unnecessary reminder. "And for the art lesson, too. We're doing landscapes next week." After they left, I reflected on the unexpected turn the afternoon had taken. I hadn't planned to share those old albums with Emma, hadn't considered how seeing them might prompt questions about her grandfather. But the conversation had opened a door, a small one perhaps, but a beginning. The following Saturday brought cold rain, making the drive to my house treacherous enough that Michael called to cancel Emma's art lesson. "The roads are awful," he explained apologetically. "Lots of accidents being reported." "Of course," I agreed immediately. "Safety comes first. We can reschedule for whenever works for you." "Actually," he said, hesitating slightly, "I was thinking maybe you could come to our house instead. Not for a formal lesson necessarily, but Emma's disappointed about missing your time together. And I thought, well, you mentioned wanting to see my workshop sometime." The invitation touched me. "I'd love to," I told him. "Give me an hour or so for the roads to improve, and I'll be there." Driving to Michael's house felt oddly momentous. Though I'd been there countless times over the years for holiday gatherings, birthday parties, and casual visits, I hadn't been invited since our confrontation months earlier. This was the first Time I would be entering their space as someone other than the accommodating mother/grandmother who could be taken for granted. Michael greeted me at the door, ushering me in from the rain. "Thanks for coming," he said, taking my wet coat. Emma's been pacing by the window for the last 20 minutes. As if on cue, Emma bounded into the foyer. "Grandma, you made it! Dad said we should set up in the dining room because it has the best light. I already put out all my art stuff." "Slow down, Emma," Michael cautioned with a laugh. "Let Grandma get in the door first." The dining room had indeed been transformed into a makeshift art studio, with supplies arranged neatly on the protected table surface and several reference books open to landscape images. "I thought we could practice the techniques we talked about last week," Emma explained eagerly, pulling me toward the table. "I tried some on my own, but the mountains look weird." For the next hour, Emma and I worked on basic landscape composition, while Michael moved around the house doing weekend chores, occasionally stopping to check our progress. It was comfortable, casual, the kind of family time I'd missed without fully realizing it. When Emma took a break to help her mother with lunch, Michael invited me to see his workshop in the converted garage. It was a tidy, well-organized space, with a workbench, various power tools, and shelves of wood in different stages of processing. "This is impressive," I said, genuinely admiring the setup. "How long have you been doing this?" "About 5 years," he replied, running a hand along the smooth surface of his workbench. "Started as a way to manage stress after that big merger at work. Turns out I'm pretty good at it." He showed me several completed projects: a delicate jewelry box with inlaid wood designs, a set of nesting tables with tapered legs, a child-sized rocking chair currently being stained. "The chair is for James's birthday," he explained. "He's been asking for one like the adult rocker we have in the living room." In the corner, partially covered with a drop cloth, I glimpsed what appeared to be a wooden chest or box in progress. Michael noticed my gaze and moved quickly to recover it more fully. "That's the Christmas gift I mentioned," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's not ready for viewing yet." "I won't peek," I promised. "But from what I can see, it looks beautiful." His expression softened. "Thanks. It's taking longer than I expected. I want it to be right." Back inside, we joined Emma and Melissa for lunch, a simple meal of soup and sandwiches, enjoyed around the kitchen table with casual conversation about neighborhood news, upcoming school events, plans for the holidays. "We were thinking of cutting our own Christmas tree this year," Melissa mentioned as she cleared plates. "There's a farm about 40 minutes north that Emma's friend's family recommended. Would you want to join us, Susan? Make it a family outing?" The casualness of the invitation, its assumption of my inclusion in a cherished family ritual, moved me unexpectedly. "I'd like that," I said, careful to keep my voice steady. "Thank you." As I prepared to leave, Michael walked me to my car, holding an umbrella over both of us against the persistent drizzle. "Thanks for coming today," he said. It meant a lot to Emma, to all of us, actually. "I enjoyed it," I told him honestly. "It was nice to see your home from a different perspective." He nodded, understanding what I wasn't quite saying, that this visit had felt different from previous ones, less performative, more genuinely connective. "Mom," he began, then hesitated. "Emma mentioned you showed her old photos, that she asked about Dad." "She did," I confirmed. "I kept it simple, appropriate for her age. Just that Mark and I separated when you were young, and eventually you lost touch. Was that okay?" "Of course," he assured me quickly. I was just surprised. Jennifer and I never really talk about him with the kids. It's like he exists in this separate compartment, completely disconnected from our lives now. "That's understandable," I said carefully, given how things ended. Michael studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I realize I've never actually heard your side of the divorce. The adult version, I mean." We were so young when it happened, and afterward, I guess we never really discussed it. I considered his implicit question. Was I ready to share that history with my adult children? To offer them the unvarnished truth about their father, about the marriage neither of them could clearly remember? It's a long story, I said finally, not one for a rainy driveway conversation. Another time then, he suggested. When you're ready, if you want to. I'll think about it, I promised. Driving home, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The confrontation that had seemed so devastating, my children questioning my competence, investigating my finances, had somehow catalyzed a deeper transformation in our relationships than I could have imagined. We were talking more honestly, seeing each other more clearly, relating with greater awareness of our patterns and assumptions. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, instances where old habits reasserted themselves. But something fundamental had shifted, allowing space for new possibilities. The Saturday before Christmas, Jennifer called with an unexpected request. "Mom, I need your help," she began without preamble. "It's Robert's company holiday party tonight, and our babysitter just canceled. Tyler's got some kind of stomach bug. Nothing serious, but obviously contagious. I was wondering if I could stay with him?" I finished for her. "Would you? I know it's last minute and Saturday night, but this party is important for Robert's career, and I promised I'd go." She sounded genuinely apologetic about asking, which was new. Previously, she would have simply assumed my availability. "I'm happy to help," I assured her. "What time should I come over?" When I arrived at Jennifer's house that evening, I found her rushing around in a half-zipped cocktail dress, hair partially styled, clearly stressed by the last-minute childcare crisis. "Thank you so much for doing this," she said, giving me a quick hug. "Tyler's watching a movie in our bedroom. He's not throwing up anymore, just tired and a little queasy. There's soup in the fridge if he gets hungry, and his medicine is on the counter with instructions." "We'll be fine," I assured her. "Take your time getting ready. Don't rush on my account." She paused in her frantic preparations, giving me a grateful look. "You're a lifesaver, Mom. Seriously." "That's what family does," I said simply. "We show up for each other when it matters." Something flickered across her face, recognition, perhaps, of how those words reflected back on her own absence from my birthday months earlier. But she didn't comment, just nodded and disappeared upstairs to finish getting ready. Tyler was indeed ensconced in his parents' bed, surrounded by pillows and blankets, a movie playing on the TV mounted to the wall. At 7, he was a quieter, more serious child than his cousin Emma. Thoughtful where she was exuberant, careful where she was spontaneous. "Hi, Grandma," he greeted me without much enthusiasm. "Mom said you're staying with me tonight." "That's right," I confirmed, settling into the armchair beside the bed. "How are you feeling?" He shrugged. "Okay, I guess. My stomach still feels weird." "Do you want to keep watching your movie, or would you prefer something else? I could read to you, or we could play a quiet game." He considered this for a moment. "Can we look at your phone? Mom says you have games on it." I smiled, remembering the new puzzle app I'd downloaded specifically with Tyler in mind after Jennifer mentioned his love of brain teasers. "I do have some games. Let me show you." For the next hour, we worked through increasingly complex puzzles together, Tyler's initial listlessness giving way to engaged concentration. When he finally tired of the activity, he asked if we could just talk instead. "Talk about what?" I asked, curious what subjects might interest him. "I don't know. Stuff." He thought for a moment. What was my mom like when she was my age? The question touched me. This desire to know his mother as a child, to connect with her past self. "Your mom was very organized," I told him. Even at 7, she liked everything in its place. She kept lists of her toys, her books, arranged by category. Tyler grinned. "She still does that. Our pantry has labels on everything." "Some things never change," I agreed with a laugh. "She was also very protective of your Uncle Michael, even though they're the same age. If other kids were mean to him, she'd step right in, hands on hips, telling them off." "Really? Mom did that?" He seemed delighted by this image of his proper, controlled mother as a fierce defender. "Oh yes, your mom has always been brave when it matters." We continued in this vein, with Tyler asking questions about Jennifer's childhood, and me providing stories and anecdotes. Some he found hilarious, others surprising, all of them helping him see his mother as a complete person with a history that preceded him. Eventually, he drifted off to sleep, and I quietly left the room, leaving the door cracked so I could hear if he needed anything. Downstairs, I found evidence of Jennifer and Robert's hasty departure, a coffee cup left on the counter, mail half sorted on the table, a scarf dropped on the sofa. Curious, I wandered through the first floor of their home, seeing it with fresh eyes. There were photographs everywhere, professional family portraits, candid snapshots of Tyler at various ages, Jennifer and Robert on vacations and at events. But mixed among these expected images were surprises. Jennifer running a marathon, fierce determination on her face. Robert kneeling beside a completed piece of furniture, looking proudly at the camera. Tyler playing chess with an elderly man I didn't recognize. These glimpses into their lives, the parts I wasn't regularly invited to witness, fascinated me. Who was the elderly chess partner? When had Jennifer become serious enough about running to compete in marathons? How had I missed these significant aspects of their lives? In the study, a framed document caught my eye. A certificate recognizing Jennifer for pro bono legal work with a women's shelter. I knew she occasionally took on cases at reduced rates for clients in need, but I'd had no idea she was formally involved with the shelter. It was yet another dimension of my daughter's life I'd been unaware of. When Jennifer and Robert returned, just after midnight, they found me reading peacefully in their living room, having straightened up the kitchen and folded a basket of clean laundry I'd discovered in the dryer. "You didn't have to do that," Jennifer protested when she noticed the folded clothes. "You were here to watch Tyler, not do our chores." "It was no trouble," I assured her. "I was just keeping busy while he slept." Robert excused himself to check on Tyler, leaving Jennifer and me alone in the living room. She kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief and sank onto the sofa beside me. "How was the party?" I asked. "Interminable," she admitted with a rueful smile. "The same conversations every year, just with different wines." "The certificate in your study," I said, changing subjects abruptly. "About the women's shelter. I didn't know you were involved with them." She looked slightly embarrassed. "It's not a big deal. I help with restraining orders, custody issues, that sort of thing. Just a few hours a month." "It is a big deal," I countered gently. "It's important work. Why haven't you ever mentioned it?" She shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "I don't know. It never came up, I guess." "A lot of things never come up," I observed. "I was looking at your photos earlier. You in a marathon, Tyler playing chess with someone I don't recognize. There are whole parts of your lives I know nothing about." Jennifer was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "I suppose that's true," she acknowledged finally. "But it goes both ways, doesn't it? Until recently, we knew very little about your interests, your friends, your non-grandma activities." "You're right," I agreed. "We've all been relating through these narrow channels, these limited roles, missing so much of who we really are." "Can I ask you something?" Jennifer said, her tone shifting to something more serious. "Why did you keep the lottery win secret? Even after we apologized, after we started trying to rebuild trust. Why not tell us then?" I considered her question carefully. "Partly to protect myself," I admitted. "I needed to be sure any changes in our relationship weren't influenced by knowledge of the money, that you were connecting with me for me, not for what I might provide. And now? Do you trust that our efforts are genuine? I'm getting there, I said honestly. It's a process, not an event. She nodded, accepting this answer. For what it's worth, I understand why you kept it private. I probably would have done the same in your position. Would you? I was genuinely curious. Jennifer had always been the more materialistic of my children, the one most concerned with financial security and status. After our behavior? Absolutely. She shook her head ruefully. We gave you every reason to be cautious. As I prepared to leave, Jennifer hugged me tightly, not the perfunctory embrace she usually offered, but a genuine expression of affection and gratitude. Thank you for tonight, she said. Not just for watching Tyler, but for seeing me. The real me, not just the roles I play. I'd like to see more of the real you, I told her. If you're willing to share. I'd like that too, she said, softly. The week before Christmas, I met Carolyn Peters for our now regular monthly lunch. These meetings had evolved from strictly professional consultations to something closer to friendship, with conversation ranging far beyond estate planning and financial matters. You seem different today, Carolyn observed as we finished our meal. More settled somehow. I smiled, recognizing the truth in her assessment. I feel more settled. Things with Jennifer and Michael have been improving, slowly, but noticeably. I'm glad to hear it, she said warmly. You deserve to have those relationships be sources of joy, not stress. It's still complicated, I admitted. There are moments when old patterns resurface, when I catch myself falling back into the accommodating mother role, or see them slipping into entitled child mode. But we're all more aware now, more intentional about how we interact. And the financial side of things? Any more threats of competency hearings? Her tone was light, but I knew her concern was genuine. No, nothing like that. In fact, I've decided to tell them about the lottery win. Officially, I mean. At Christmas. Carolyn raised an eyebrow. That's a significant step. What prompted the decision? I considered this carefully. I think we're ready, all of us. They've demonstrated real effort to see me as a whole person, to respect my autonomy. And I'm secure enough now in my own boundaries that I'm not worried about the knowledge changing our dynamic in unhealthy ways. Well, it should make for an interesting holiday, she remarked with a smile. Do you anticipate any issues? Probably some initial shock, maybe some hurt feelings about being kept in the dark for so long. But nothing catastrophic. We've laid enough groundwork over these past months to weather the revelation. As we parted, Carolyn squeezed my hand warmly. Whatever happens, Susan, remember how far you've come. The woman who walked into my office after that birthday disaster wouldn't recognize the woman you are today. No, I agreed. She wouldn't. And that's a good thing. Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow, transforming Springfield into a picture-perfect holiday scene. As agreed, we gathered at my house for dinner before attending a candlelight service at the local church, tradition we'd maintained since the twins were small. The atmosphere was relaxed, joyful, with none of the tension that had characterized our Thanksgiving gathering just a month earlier. The children were bubbling with excitement about Santa's imminent arrival. Robert and Michael were discussing a local development project with genuine interest rather than forced politeness. Jennifer and Melissa were collaborating on last-minute food preparation, laughing together as they arranged desserts on a serving platter. I moved among them, part of the flow, yet also slightly removed, observing this family tableau with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. How close we had come to fracturing permanently. How remarkable that we had found our way back to each other, not through pretense or capitulation, but through honest confrontation and genuine change. After dinner, before we left for the church service, I asked everyone to gather in the living room for a moment. They arranged themselves on sofas and chairs, looking at me expectantly. "I have something to tell you all," I began, suddenly nervous despite my careful preparation. "Something I've been keeping private for about a year now." Jennifer and Michael exchanged glances, clearly bracing themselves for whatever revelation might follow. "Last December," I continued, "I won the lottery, the Powerball specifically. After taxes and taking the lump sum option, I received just over $12 million. The room fell utterly silent. Even the children, sensing the significance of the moment, stopped their fidgeting to stare at me wide-eyed. $12 million, Robert repeated finally, breaking the stunned silence. "You've had $12 million for a year, and never mentioned it?" "That's correct," I confirmed calmly. "But why?" Jennifer asked, her expression a complex mixture of confusion, hurt, and dawning comprehension. "Why keep something like that secret?" "Initially, I planned to surprise you," I explained. "I was going to give each of you a substantial trust, $2 million each, as a birthday gift." I paused, letting that sink in. "I had the paperwork prepared, the checks ready. That's why I was so eager for you to come to my birthday." "Dinner?" Michael's face paled as understanding hit him. "The dinner we both missed. The one where we lied about why we couldn't come." I nodded. "After that night, after discovering your deception, I reconsidered. I realized that giving you that money without addressing the underlying issues in our relationship might do more harm than good." "So you changed your will," Jennifer said softly. "Redirected the money to foundations and charities instead." "Not entirely," I clarified. "I've established education trusts for the grandchildren. And there are still provisions for both of you, smaller than what I'd originally planned, but substantial nonetheless. The bulk of the windfall, though, yes, that's gone to causes I believe in." Emma, who had been listening with increasing confusion, tugged at Michael's sleeve. "Dad, is Grandma rich?" she stage whispered. A ripple of unexpected laughter broke the tension, Michael's shoulders relaxing slightly as he looked down at his daughter. "Yes, sweetheart, apparently Grandma is very rich." "Cool," Emma declared decisively. "Can we still go to church now?" Mrs. Peterson said I could help light the candles. The innocent question, so divorced from the adult complexities swirling through the room, served as a perfect reset. Jennifer checked her watch and nodded. "We should get going if we want good seats." As everyone gathered coats and gloves, I noticed Tyler lingering behind, his expression thoughtful beyond his years. "Grandma," he said quietly when the others had moved toward the door. "Are you telling us because you trust us now?" The perceptiveness of his question touched me deeply. "Yes," I told him honestly. "That's exactly why." He nodded, satisfied with this answer. "Good. Mom's been trying. Really hard to be better, I can tell." At the church, sitting in our usual pew with family surrounding me, Jennifer and Robert to my left, Michael and Melissa with the children to my right, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The service was beautiful, as always. Emma proudly helped light candles while Tyler solemnly read a short verse about the meaning of Christmas. Traditional carols filled the sanctuary, their familiar melodies carrying memories of decades of holidays. As we sang Silent Night by candlelight, I glanced at the faces of my children, illuminated in the soft glow. They seemed thoughtful, subdued, clearly still processing the revelation I'd shared earlier. But there was no anger in their expressions, no resentment or calculation, just quiet contemplation. Back at home, we gathered for hot chocolate and cookies before the families departed for their own homes, where Santa's visits would occur. As Michael helped Emma into her coat, he paused beside me. "Mom, about what you told us." I tensed slightly, bracing for whatever might follow. Thank you, he said simply, for trusting us with the truth. And for everything else too. The foundations, the education trusts. You've created a real legacy. It's just money, Michael, I reminded him gently. The real legacy is how we treat each other, the values we demonstrate through our actions. He nodded, his expression serious. I know. That's what I'm trying to teach Emma and James. That's why. He hesitated. That's why I'm grateful for how this all unfolded. If you had given us that money on your birthday, we might never have confronted the problems in our relationship. We might have gone on as we were, taking you for granted, missing what really matters. His insight surprised and moved me. I hadn't thought of it that way, I admitted. But you might be right. I know I am, he said with quiet confidence. Some lessons can only be learned through loss, or the threat of loss. After they'd all gone, I sat alone in my living room, looking at the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree surrounded by carefully wrapped presents. The house felt peaceful rather than empty, filled with the echoes of family laughter and conversation. Tomorrow, they would all return for Christmas dinner and gift opening. The cycle of family gatherings would continue, but with a new awareness, a deeper appreciation on all sides. My phone chimed with an incoming text. Jennifer, who must have just arrived home. Thank you for trusting us with the truth, she'd written. I understand now why you didn't tell us sooner. We hadn't earned it yet. Her acknowledgement of their earlier failings, so straightforward and undefensive, touched me deeply. You've earned it now, I texted back. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight glinting off fresh snow that had fallen overnight. I took my coffee to the living room, settling into my favorite chair to watch. The light change as the sun rose higher, casting rainbow prisms through the crystal ornaments on the tree. The house would soon be full again. Voices calling greetings, children exclaiming over presents, the kitchen bustling with meal preparations. But for now, this pocket of solitude felt precious. A moment to reflect on the extraordinary year that was ending. I thought about the woman I'd been 12 months ago, financially secure but emotionally cautious, organizing my life around my children's needs and schedules, measuring my worth by their approval. How profoundly that woman had changed, propelled by disappointment into a journey of self-discovery and reinvention. The lottery win had been a catalyst, certainly. But the real transformation had come from within, from finding the courage to set boundaries, to prioritize my own needs, to require respect rather than assuming I didn't deserve it. And my children had changed too, in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The painful confrontation that might have permanently fractured our relationship had instead forced us all to examine patterns long taken for granted. The very real possibility of estrangement had highlighted what we stood to lose, motivating genuine efforts to rebuild on healthier foundations. We weren't perfect. There would still be missteps, moments of reverting to old habits, times when we'd disappoint each other. But we were moving forward with greater awareness, more honest communication, and deeper appreciation for the gift of family when it functions as it should, as a source of mutual support rather than one-directional sacrifice. My reverie was interrupted by the doorbell, much earlier than I'd expected anyone to arrive. Opening the door, I found Michael standing alone on the porch, holding a beautiful wooden box. Sorry to come so early, he said, looking slightly embarrassed. I wanted to give you this privately, before everyone else arrives. I invited him in, curious about this unexpected visit. In the living room, he handed me the box. Clearly the project I'd glimpsed in his workshop, now completed and polished to a warm glow. Open it, he encouraged, watching nervously as I ran my fingers over the smooth wood. The box was exquisite. Cherry wood with inlaid maple details forming a pattern of intertwined vines and leaves around the edges. The hinges were brass, carefully set to allow the lid to open smoothly without any catch or sound. Inside, nestled on a velvet lining, lay a collection of small wooden objects: a miniature paintbrush, a tiny piano, a delicate cat figurine, a perfect little book, and several other items I didn't immediately recognize. "They represent your new interests," Michael explained, seeing my puzzlement. "The things you've discovered or rediscovered this past year. Painting, music, your cats, your book club." He pointed to each corresponding item. "These others are from Emma and James, things they associate with you. A cookie because you always bake with them. A garden trowel because Emma loves helping you plant flowers." I touched the tiny objects, marveling at their detail and the thoughtfulness behind each one. "Michael, this is extraordinary. You made all these?" He nodded, pleased by my reaction. It took longer than I expected. Getting the details right was challenging. "But why give it to me now, before everyone arrives?" His expression turned more serious. "Because I wanted to explain what it means. This isn't just a decorative box. It's meant to be a symbol of how we see you now, not just as mom or grandma, but as Susan, a whole person with your own passions and interests." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "The old Michael, the one who missed your birthday, who tried to manage your life, who hired investigators to check up on you, he would have given you something generic, something that reflected what he thought you should want, not what you actually care about." The insight in his words moved me deeply. "You've been paying attention," I said softly. "I'm learning too," he corrected with a rueful smile. "It's still a work in progress." "For all of us," I agreed. Later that day, as the house filled with family activity, Jennifer and Melissa coordinating dinner preparations, Robert teaching the children a card game at the dining table, Michael helping me arrange presents under the tree, I found myself stepping back occasionally, observing the scene with quiet gratitude. These relationships, so nearly broken beyond repair, had instead been forged into something stronger, more honest, more mutually sustaining. The financial windfall that might have simply papered over our dysfunctions had instead, through its initial withholding, forced us to address the real issues undermining our connections. Money, I reflected, watching Tyler carefully dealing cards to his younger cousins, had never been the real inheritance I wanted to leave my children. Values, resilience, the capacity for genuine relationship, these were the true legacies that would serve them throughout their lives. As if sensing my thoughts, Jennifer approached, slipping an arm around my waist as she followed my gaze to the scene at the table. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. I smiled at the familiar phrase, one my own mother had used when I grew quiet and contemplative. "Just thinking about inheritance," I said. "The things that really matter." She nodded, understanding immediately. "Not the money." "Not the money," I confirmed, though that's nice too. She laughed softly. "It certainly doesn't hurt, but you're right. It's not the main thing." She hesitated, then added, "You know what I realized recently? Even if you hadn't won the lottery, even if there was no financial inheritance at all, I'd still want this closer relationship, this better understanding between us. It's worth more than any trust fund." Her words echoed my own thoughts, so precisely that I felt a surge of emotion, pride, love, and a profound sense of accomplishment. Not the superficial pride of material success or social standing, but the deeper satisfaction of having raised a daughter capable of this level of insight and growth. "We've come a long way this year," I said, squeezing her hand. "We have," she agreed. "And we're still going." She smiled, a hint of her childhood mischievousness returning to her expression. "Who knows what next year will bring? Maybe you'll take up skydiving or run for mayor." "Don't give me ideas," I warned with a laugh. As the day progressed into evening, with dinner served and presents opened, with the children growing sleepy and the adults relaxing with wine by the fire, I found myself filled with a quiet contentment I hadn't experienced in years. Not the frantic happiness of special occasions, nor the temporary satisfaction of material abundance, but a deeper, more sustainable joy rooted in genuine connection and mutual respect. The lottery win that had initially seemed like a means to secure my children's futures had instead secured something far more precious: my own sense of worth beyond motherhood and the foundation for authentic relationships moving forward. Standing in my doorway late that night, watching taillights disappear down the snowy street as the last family car departed, I felt a profound sense of rightness, as if every difficulty, every confrontation, every painful realization of the past year had been leading to this moment of peaceful completion. The money, substantial as it was, had been merely the catalyst. The real transformation had come through the courage to change patterns long established, to risk conflict for the sake of authenticity, to believe that even the most entrenched relationship dynamics could be healed through honesty and genuine effort on all sides. I closed the door against the cold, turning back to my home. No longer just a house where a mother and grandmother performed her expected roles, but the domain of Susan Miller, artist, philanthropist, friend, and woman, fully, inhabiting her own life, finally and completely at 65. Whatever the new year might bring, I would meet it on my own terms, surrounded by family who saw me clearly and valued me completely, for exactly who I was. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the IE mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.